All right, hello and welcome into another edition of 8Sports Nightcap here on 8 News Live on WRIC.com, on YouTube, on our Facebook page as well. I got the Facebook page pulled up to my left. If this is your first time joining in to Nightcap, it's just a recap show where we talk about what happened this past weekend, kind of preview what's going to happen this upcoming weekend, and just talk a little ball. I'm here joined by my producer, Will Gonzalez. He's in studio helping put this thing together. We thank him for his insight, and we'll get with him later on in the show to kind of talk about, some of the trending topics in the sports world after we get through everything else that we got to get through here on 8 Sports Nightcap. Louis Smith has tuned in on Facebook. Hello to you. Good evening as well. And let's kind of get started with probably the biggest storyline of the week here. It's that Tony Elliott will be returning to Clemson, the old team he used to play for, the old team that he, of course, was the offensive coordinator for, won a couple of national championships with Dabo Swinney. So there's a lot of intrigue in this matchup between the Virginia Cavaliers and the Clemson Tigers as they face off this upcoming Saturday in Death Valley. Going to be really interesting. I was at this matchup this past Saturday when the Cavaliers took on Louisville. A lot of excitement was going into this game. The Cavaliers, of course, were off to one of their best starts since Bronco Mendenhall was in town. They were 4-1 to start the season. And so I was expecting a really good crowd out there against a really good Louisville team that's been ranked in the top 25 a couple of times this season. But I will say, I think it was fall break on the grounds, and it showed that I would have liked to have seen a little more fans out there from the Cavalier faithful, but nonetheless, they played a really great game, came down to the wire, and I got the highlights for you from what I experienced on the grounds at UVA. So how about we go over those highlights and get to this video here. And here it is right there for you, the Cavaliers. A pretty good atmosphere, despite the fact that, the sunny side of the stadium was kind of weak looking in terms of how many fans were there. There was still a lot of excitement. Love when the Cavalier comes out on the horse. It's one of the better traditions, I think, for Virginia, and that's coming from a guy that, that grew up going to Virginia Tech games. So if I have to say that, it's pretty cool. A lot of excitement, a lot of confidence from this Virginia team coming into the game against Louisville Cardinals team that was expected to maybe compete for an ACC championship. They were 3-2 entering this game, and Virginia started out great. Anthony Colandrea had a huge game on the ground and through the air. He actually was Virginia's leading rusher in this game. Kobe Pace, the running back, really struggled to get the ball moving. But the pass game was working, so it really wasn't that big of a deal. Tyler Neville with the big pickup there. He had an incredible game. We'll get more on him later here in a little bit. In the opening drive of the game, Grady Brosterhaus got into the end zone on a quarterback sneak. It was an interesting play where they brought in a couple of extra offensive linemen in tight end positions to get, kind of the sneak going. And they got down to the goal line and they scored immediately. That was something that UVA has, talked about how they wanted to do in these games, and they hadn't been able to do that. Of course, they went down 14-0 to Boston College. And so for them to come out, opening drive, play the script, go down the field, get into the end zone. It was a great start to the game. Now, you saw there was a bad punt that went into the back of the Upman, and it set up great field position for Louisville, and it wouldn't be much longer until they would score this touchdown, of course, by Isaac Brown. He had 2 rushing touchdowns on the day. That would tie the game at 7 apiece, and then from there, Colandrea, kind of continued doing what he did great in this game, use his legs, brought the Cavaliers down the field. This is now the second quarter. And they came up with an interesting situation of when it was 4th down and goal. Tony Elliott elected to go for it. This was a big 3rd down play, one of the best, probably overlooked plays of the game. Colandrea there to get that first down late. Kobe Pace, he was the leading running back for the Cavaliers. He brought him down closer to the goal line in that second quarter. And I believe this is the 4th down play. No, not quite yet. This is another catch there from Malachi Fields. He ended up being the leading receiver for the Cavaliers. And this, I think, was a tide turner in terms of momentum in this game. The Cavaliers got down inside the red zone. They got it down to the 3 or 4 yard line. And Tony Elliott elected to go for it. And this was the 4th down play that did not result in a touchdown for Virginia. They would turn the ball over from there. And Louisville kind of grabbed the momentum for the rest of this game until late, because they would then go down the field and have some success. They added a field goal to go up 10-7. And Virginia responded with a couple of nice plays. How about the double pass there perfect pass from Fields to Tyler Neville, who I mentioned had a great game. They responded to a couple Louisville scores with 2 field goals of their own, as the Cardinals took a 17-13 lead after the 2 field goals, and that's when Virginia kind of came back to life, had a couple of big sacks back-to-back. There's the first one. Here's the second one, and they kind of got some momentum back, and that great defense led to a great drive that put Virginia ahead. This, of course, Anthony Calandria, he connects with Xavier Brown from 46 yards out. This was a really good play design. If you go back and look at the play, he was wide open, and then from there he just used his feet. Unfortunately, a lot of traffic was in the way for my shot here, and I think my camera goes to the ground here. Sorry about that. If you saw that during the 6 o'clock news, I hadn't remembered that was in there. But yeah, big touchdown there for Xavier Brown. That put UVA up 20-7, and then there was like 7 or 8 minutes left in the game, and the Cardinals would then have to try to get down the field to respond, and they did that. They were able to move the ball a couple of times while UVA struggled to respond. First, they get all the way down here, and that's when freshman safety, our guy from Thomas Dale, Ethan Minter, comes up with the big pick that looked like it could be a game-sealing play from the Thomas Dale alum. Comes up with a huge pick, the freshman on the goal line. So excited about it. I'm pretty sure that was his first interception in a Cavalier. Look at Tony Elliott right there. First guy to congratulate him as well. But Louisville would get the ball back after the Cavs would have to punt. Another great run from Isaac Brown set them up on the goal line, and then because Brown was running so well, play action worked so well. I got faked, the defenders got faked, and it resulted in a Jamari Johnson touchdown, as they would then take a 24-20 lead. With 1:56 remaining, that was the first play out of the 2-minute timeout. And then from there, Virginia was unable to get the ball past midfield. That was the first down. And then from there, it would be 4 straight incompletions, and it would result in a Cavaliers loss. Their second loss at home this season. They, of course, lost to Maryland earlier this year, and it was their first conference loss. So it kind of put them in a tough situation heading into I'd like to pause this here. Heading into what's going to be a really tough matchup next week on the road at Clemson against Dabo Swinney, a Clemson team that kind of has their swagger back. For the past couple of years, so many people have kind of written off Clemson as an afterthought with the transfer portal stuff, with all that nonsense, and how they can't do it with their own players. And Dabo has been so vocal about just using his own players, and so it's going to be a tough matchup. And then you add on the interesting aspect of the fact that Tony Elliott will be returning to Clemson to take on the team that he used to coach for and won national championships with. And after this loss, I think what is important to say is that the Cavaliers last year, they finished 3-9. The year before that, they finished 3-7. We are at the halfway point of the season, and Virginia is 4-2. They've already surpassed last year's win total. They've already tied how many ACC wins they had the past 2 seasons. They've had a really great start to the first half of this year. And so after the game, I asked Coach Elliott, at this halfway point, before this emotional game coming up against Clemson, what do you like about your team? And this is what he had to say to me following the loss to Louisville on Saturday. Halfway point of the season now. I know it's kind of hard to answer this question right after a game, but what do you like about your team right now as you go into this tough matchup next week at Clemson?
Yeah, I mean, you just saw it. Like you just saw a football team that's persevering regardless of any personnel issues that we have. Man, guys are stepping up. Man, they believe, right? They're fighting. They're scrapping. Right? Nobody gave them a shot to be in that ball game versus Louisville, right? And these guys believe that with all of the skill that they have over there, that the coaches and themselves could formulate a good plan, and they played their butts off, and man, we're getting better at winning fourth quarter games, right? We're overcoming adversity in games, right? We're doing some good things, getting off to fast starts. So there's a lot to really like about this football team. But most importantly, man, we got a group of young men that believe in each other. They believe in what this program's all about, and man, they're laying it on the line every Saturday for each other, for this university. So there's a lot to love and like about this. And in terms of the relationship,
yeah, a lot to love about this team. That's what he had to say following the loss to Louisville. Let's look at some of these numbers before we turn the page to Clemson. Calandria had a really good day. He passed the ball 45 times, and a lot of the reason was because Virginia was down, but also because they could not get Kobe Pace going. 10 carries for 28 yards. Calandria got it done not only with his legs, 84 yards on 15 carries, but he passed the ball 45 times in this game, 26 completions, nearly 300 yards, maybe one of his best games as a quarterback, and he hasn't turned the ball over for a couple of weeks now, so he's been playing really well, and I think if you're a Cavalier fan, you got to be happy with that play. Malachi Fields was incredible, 129 yards out of him. Tyler Neville had 7 receptions as a tight end. You don't see that very often, and the defense played pretty good for Virginia. They were able to keep Louisville off of the field. They dominated the time of possession, 34 minutes to 25. It's rare to lose a game when you dominate time of possession like that, but the Cavaliers, each time they got into the red zone, they couldn't get into the end zone and get those extra points. You think of the 2 field goals. You think of going for it on 4th down and not taking an extra 3 there. I mean, that could have been 21 points that the Cavs kind of left on the board there. And now, of course, it's the big talk of the week. Tony Elliott returned to Clemson, where he played for Coach Sweeney, where he coached alongside Coach Sweeney. It's going to be an emotional week for him. He didn't want to lean into these emotions so much today during his press conference. It was kind of the same Tony Elliott we've been used to seeing all year, where he's so mundane and won't, he doesn't want to give the other team any, insight or bulletin board material or whatever. And so this was what he had to say today when previewing the matchup against the 10th-ranked Clemson Tigers on Saturday in Death Valley.
I mean, he's gone from being a father figure when he was coaching me as a player, right, to being a mentor as a young coach in the business and then a colleague, right? So it's kind of had all 3 phases tied in one, and he's one of the first individuals that I'll call if I have a problem or I have a question, and I don't think he gets enough credit for that. I think that people focus on the wrong things sometimes when they deal with Coach Sweeney, because he tells the truth the way he sees it, right? And not many people nowadays will tell the truth the way they see it, right? And so I value that, but I think if you really know his heart and what he does off the field and how many people he's impacted, not just his players, but family members of the players, people in the community. I mean, there's nobody that, in my opinion, in college football that gives more back than Coach Sweeney. So it's going to be fun to compete, and it's a great test for our program to see where we are. That program there has been the standard in the league for a very long time. They're back playing at a very, very high level, and looks like it's going to be, you got to go through them to win the league with the way that they're playing. So it's going to be a good test to see kind of where we are as we build this program, and there's going to be some similarities too. So it'll be a good gauge for.
We did talk a lot about the.
So not only was it a situation of him going back home, but it kind of gives you an insight of kind of what he wants his program to be like. It sounds like he's trying to build what Sweeney built at Clemson. So it'll be an interesting matchup. See how Anthony Calandria and company kind of compete against a college football playoff type team. A lot of praise from Elliot on the Clemson Tigers. All right, let's shift our attention to the Virginia Tech Hokies. They had a bye week this past week as they recovered from that trip across the country to Stanford, where, of course, they did win. This week, they take on Boston College on a Thursday night game, and there's a lot of history with Virginia Tech on Thursday night, a lot of history on Virginia Tech against Boston College on Thursday night as well. I've found a couple of different stats of Virginia Tech playing on Thursday, because I think when you think of Thursday night college football, Virginia Tech, not only for us Virginians, but across the country, is like known as the team that plays on Thursday night. This will be the 30th anniversary of Tech playing for the first time back in 1995 against West Virginia, that they'll play on Thursday night. And in those 30 years, they've played on Thursday 37 times. They're 24, or this will be the 37th meeting. They're 24-12 all time, which is an incredible record. Probably a lot of that has to do with how successful the Hokies were during the 2000s. But the Hokies have played Boston College 6 times on Thursday night alone. They're 3-3. Some of those memories, I think, come up. Of course, the Matt Ryan game. Virginia Tech lost that one in a top 7 matchup at the time. I was at that game as a child. It was heartbreaking, and I have nightmares about it till this day. An interesting note about Boston College there this year, Bill O'Brien is their new head coach. I think that was one of the names that kind of got forgotten about this past coaching carousel. He, of course, was the offensive coordinator at Alabama with Bryce Young, and then he moved. Of course, spent all those years with Bill Belichick as well with the Patriots, and now he's the new head coach at Boston College, and they've had some success. Of course, they lost the game to Virginia. They probably should have won. They went up 14-0 in that game, and then let up 24 unanswered points. Hokies, they're about a touchdown favorite in this matchup, and of course, their quarterback Thomas I'm probably not going to be able to say that. Costanel, I'm not going to. Yeah, we'll just pretend that I didn't mess that up. Thomas, their quarterback, has been the BC star for 2 years now. Last year had a lot of success on the ground running the ball, and then this year he's not been able to run the ball very well at all. I think he's only surpassed like 20 yards rushing in 2 of their 6 games, where that was their part of like half of their offense a year ago. So it's been interesting to see just how great or bad that BC quarterback has been after he had so much success last season. And then, of course, that game's set for Thursday. Another interesting note for this matchup, Sports Center will be on campus in Blacksburg on Thursday, as they kind of prepare and get the nation excited. Kind of the same thing they did with James Madison last week. They had Sports Center on campus last Thursday as well. And, of course, the JMU Dukes got a huge win in their Thursday game. It'll be interesting to see how Virginia Tech does under the national spotlight. They've kind of had these spotlight games a couple of times this year with that Miami game as well. So we'll see if they show up again like they did against Miami, and see if the Hokies can improve on a 3-3 record. I think a lot of Hokie fans thought that Virginia Tech would probably be at a better record at this point of the season, but you think of those 3 losses. It's an overtime loss to Vanderbilt that beat Alabama. It is a last 3-minute touchdown they gave up against Rutgers, who has proven to be pretty good, that they lost against, and then a non-touchdown Hail Mary against Miami. So even in Virginia Tech's losses, they've looked pretty good this season, and this is what head coach Brent Pry had to say about their game against Boston College this Thursday. And do note that I made a mistake editing this video, so coach's head is cut off a little bit. But what he says is what's important, right?
With BC, it's been a lot of good games. They have fielded some really good teams. My first game as a Virginia Tech Hokie in 1995 was against Boston College here at home. We showed some clips, Pearson Prelo, Goove, Xavier, all these guys we got on staff have made plays, J.C. Price, against this group. So we pulled up some of that old film and, just to make sure they understand, this is a big game, particularly Thursday.
A big game it is. It'll be interesting to see if Virginia Tech steps up and gets another big ACC win. I think it'll tell a lot how the rest of the season goes when you look at that Virginia Tech schedule. It's there's some winnable games, but if they lose this game against Boston College, it's going to be hard to win some other games. All right, let's turn our attention to the NFL. The Commanders fell to the Ravens 30-23 in a quarterback battle that I think a lot of people were excited for. Of course, Jaden Daniels kind of reminds you of Lamar Jackson when you watch him. And I think part of that is the early success that he's having, and, of course, his ability to be so well running the ball. Washington in this game, kind of like UVA, struggled to run the ball. Jaden Daniels was their leading rusher with just 22 yards on 6 carries. Brian Robinson or Austin Eckler could get nothing going. But Jaden Daniels, despite that, played really well. 24 completions, 269 yards, 2 scores, didn't turn the ball over. Terry McLaurin had a big day, 2 touchdowns. And if you're a Washington Commanders fans, maybe you're humbled a little bit and you're not thinking Super Bowl anymore. But I still think Washington looks like the best team in the NFC East. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't make a playoff push and be one of those teams that we're talking about at the end of the season. But when you face off against a team that has as many talent and weapons as Baltimore does with Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson, Zay Flowers, it kind of puts you back in your place a little bit that maybe the Commanders could, they're not there yet. Are they a postseason team? I think definitely. Will they go make a deep run? Probably not. But I mean, they lost by a score to a really talented Ravens team that is absolutely a Super Bowl contender this year. So if you're a Commanders fan, I think you're cautiously optimistic. And the good news is that this week, of course, you'll host a Carolina team who has no sense of identity right now. They found that little spark with Andy Dalton coming in, but I think that's gone. And it should be a nice little bounce-back game before we see the next interesting matchup for Jaden Daniels against the other rookie quarterback, of course, Caleb Williams and the Bears, who they'll face off against in 2 weeks. All right, let's talk a little blitz before we talk about some of the top stories of the weekend with Will here in a second. Looking back to last week, how about we give a little love to our 8Sports Blitz Play of the Week? It's a new tradition that we've been doing here on 8Sports, where I pick the best 3 plays, or the plays I thought were the best, and let our fans, vote on who wins it. I already had said who won it during the 6 o'clock news, but if you were not watching that, we'll show you the results here in just a moment. How about I give you the 3 plays that were up.
Sports Blitz Play of the Week, our new tradition here on 8 Sports, where we bring you the best 3 plays from this week's high school football slate. And you, our viewers, vote on which play you think deserves to win the title of Play of the Week. For play number 1, we'll head to Thomas Dale. It's the first play of the game, and it's none other than UVA commit Dylan Newton-Short.
Yeah, Matoka's Dylan Newton-Short. He was the first touchdown of the game for Matoka, who's undefeated this season. He, of course, is a UVA commit. That was our first play. Rashad Cherry's pick 6 was our second play and option. That was one of the best defensive plays for Thomas Jefferson as they remain undefeated with a 30-0 win. And then Rappahannock's Clyde Kelly Jr., they also remain undefeated as they go on the road to Essex and get a win with that touchdown. An incredible play from Clyde Kelly Jr. that would result in, of course, a win for Rappahannock, their first win over Essex since 2001. Some really interesting stats there. And those Rappahannock fans, man, did they show out on our poll? Here are the results from our Week 7 play of the week. Rappahannock's Clyde Kelly gets 91% of the votes, and a lot of people voted in this poll as well, are the most votes we've had for this so far. Newton-Short came in second with 6% and Cherry with 3%. And I think that just goes to show you how, supportive the Raiders are of their team as they get 91% of the votes. And this week's play of the week. So big congratulations to Clyde Kelly on winning our play of the week. As for our game of the week, this poll will close at midnight, but it's looking pretty one-sided as well. And why would it not be? Huguenot is going to travel to LC Bird to put their undefeated record on the line. Huguenot 6-0 to start the season. LC Bird 5-1. Their only loss comes to Thomas Dale, and that loss was in a rivalry game where the emotions were high and there was a late turnover that resulted in them losing. So that game really could have gone either way. So it's kind of interesting to see. I'm excited to see that matchup. Option 2 is Powhatan versus Midlothian. Midlothian only has 1 loss this season. That was to Monacan. And I think if they played again, I think Midlothian would win that game to kind of give it an idea of how great the Trojans have been down the stretch ever since that Week 1 loss. And Powhatan is a team that just keeps playing really hard teams on their schedule. They're 500 and could pose a threat on the road at Midlothian. That's our other option for game of the week. Some other notable games that we'll be seeing this Friday night. Glen Allen, who of course was undefeated going into last week's game of the week, lost to Verina in our game of the week last week. They take on a Hermitage team that is red hot. That'll be interesting to see. Hopewell's a top 25 team in the state. They will travel to an undefeated Matoka. And, of course, Armstrong, who's undefeated this season, will host Atlee, a higher-classed team. So if they get a win there, that'll be big points for them. And to kind of give you an idea just how great they've been. We're starting to kind of see how these teams fare against one another with who's undefeated and who's the real deal and maybe who's pretenders, right? Matoka, Thomas Jefferson, Rappahannock, Huguenot, and Armstrong all remain undefeated at this point in the season. And, of course, we have some other great teams as well. Highland Springs, they'll be hosting Potomac from Maryland this Friday night as well. So excited to see this Friday night's high school football slate. It should be a lot of fun. All right, well, let's finish things off with some top stories. We'll bring Will Gonzalez in here to kind of talk about the weekend of sports, kind of what's on everybody's mind. Will, how we doing, buddy?
I'm good, Nolan. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited about the upcoming NFL trade deadline. There's been a lot of very significant moves, I would say.
Absolutely.
Especially in the AFC East.
Yeah.
And I want to bring your attention to this interesting stat that I read earlier from ESPN about Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams from their time together on the Packers from 2014, to 2021. They had a total of 615 receptions, and that was for a total of over 7,500 yards and 68 touchdowns. But Nolan, that was 2014 was 10 years ago at this point. So I want to know from you, do you think that this trade is significant for the Jets, and do you think that they can combine for some numbers like they had back in the late 2010s?
Yeah, so let's set the stage up a little bit. So it was Devontae Adams to the Jets, right? And then who went to Buffalo? That was Amari Cooper, right?
Amari Cooper, correct.
Yeah, so those are the two big trades. What's interesting about Aaron Rodgers and watching him play last night, the second you think that maybe he's washed or too old, he'll make some incredible play, right? Like I've been so ready to write him off as, past his prime, and then he has the Hail Mary, and then, comes down to the, he had an interception late, I know, but the fact that he's able to keep these teams in games at this point's interesting. And I think another thing that's interesting to kind of bring up your stat, he likes his guys, right? Like Watson, he brought in from Green Bay, and I don't think he would even fit on another team. The fact that he wants them, and then, Devontae Adams was his guy for so long. He wants them as well. And I will say that it feel like the Jets have been weapons. They're a weapon or so away from, really being good on offense. The defense, I didn't think played that bad last night either. So I think the answer to kind of talk about your question is, if Aaron Rodgers is happy, I think it's going to work out. And I'm sure that he played a huge role in getting Devontae Adams and getting him out of that situation in Las Vegas where, Aiden O'Connell or the kid from ECU, what's his name? Gardner Minshew was throwing the ball to him. So it'll be interesting to see if the Jets are contenders now. I mean, they're kind of behind right now. They're 2-4. Kind of sitting in a situation where it's win now for them, and I think that's kind of how they felt about it. What do you think?
I think that the familiarity between Rodgers and Adams is very significant. Like you said, he does love his guys, and I think we know Aaron Rodgers to be a creature of habit, and so I think having someone like Adams, that they do have such an established connection over the years, I do think that's very significant. I think having someone with the same numbers as Adams that isn't Adams, I think would probably not yield the same results. So pretty exciting for the New York Jets. Also, the defense, I think, is very significant. They have the second fewest yards allowed so far this season, only second to the Titans.
Yeah, it feels like they gotta get going now. Like I know it's early in the season, right at the halfway point, but at some point you gotta look in the mirror and realize what you're dealing with, and playing in that division is not going to be easy when they're still going to have to play Buffalo again, and I guess the Dolphins aren't really like themselves without having Tua, but still, that Amari Cooper acquisition was interesting as well because they got him pretty cheap, but he's been bad this year, and you can blame a lot of that on Deshaun Watson and his struggles, but at the same time, Cooper, I saw a stat online today that he has the most drops in the NFL. So, maybe that's part of the reason that Watson's been struggling. But it kind of felt that's kind of what Buffalo needed a receiver as well. I mean, leaving the shoes of Stephon Diggs, they left it in Shakir's hands and the rookie Keon Coleman, and they haven't really stepped up like I think they were expecting to. So, it's interesting that you see this a lot in the NBA, right? All these moves, mid-season and, plug and play. And we haven't seen that in the NFL. And I feel like now it's pretty common to see, or it's becoming more common for all of a sudden a team to drastically change their position with adding a piece like that, right?
Absolutely. Blowing it up has made its way from the NBA to the NFL.
Yeah, it really has.
It's exciting.
It really has. All right, well, that's going to wrap things up here for another episode of 8 Sports Nightcap. I think we hit just about everything from Virginia Tech, Virginia, Richmond. They'll be hosting Delaware this week. I know we didn't touch on them, but they were off this past week, so that we didn't have a game to recap with them. But I think the big one, as mentioned, Tony Elliott returns to Clemson. I think we'll learn a lot about the Cavaliers, and I think we'll learn a lot about Virginia Tech as they host a Boston College team that is really good, better than their record would show. But thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of 8 Sports Nightcap. Thanks so much to Will Gonzalez for helping produce today and bringing up a couple of good topics there at the end of the show, because that was the biggest headline by far. Adams, of course, to Buffalo, and Amari Cooper, or rather to Buffalo, Adams to the Jets, rejoining Aaron Rodgers. But thanks very much for tuning in to 8 Sports Nightcap. We'll see you next week, same place, same time, right here on WRIC.com, YouTube, and Facebook. We'll see you next week, same place, same time, 6:45, following the 6 o'clock news. Good night, everybody. I'll see you tonight at 11.